Ford was built on the belief that the world doesn't get to decide what you're capable of. You do. So ask yourself, can you or can't you? Can you load up a Ford F-150 and build your dream with sweat and steel? Can you chase thrills and conquer curves in a Mustang? Can you take a Bronco to where the map ends and adventure begins? Whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. Ready, set, Ford.
Ray-Ban Meta glasses come with open-ear audio, so you can listen to your favorite music without blocking out the world around you.
Hey, Meta, play Gorgeous.
Here's Gorgeous by Doja Cat.
You can also ask Meta AI questions.
Hey, Meta, when's Doja Cat's next concert?
Doja Cat is playing at the Los Angeles Theater next Tuesday.
Sweet.
Ray-Ban Meta glasses, available at Ray-Ban stores and other authorized retailers.
Ah, Smart Water. Pure, crisp taste.
That's really good water.
It's the kind of water that says, I have my life together.
I do feel more sophisticated.
Smart Water. For those with a taste for taste. Grab yours today.
One of the things that drew me to this house in particular was being able to watch the sun move across the sky and set.
Liz Kay loves her view.
And the way the light moves through this house. Osprey will fly. We will have Canada geese move across. Those things are all really core to who I am.
Every day, the sun paints an arc over Liz Kay's picture window as her backyard endlessly welcomes the water. And every day, Liz watches the forces that move that water.
My neighbor's dock broke loose 2 nights ago, and it floated on the 11/8 tide onto my property. Everybody deals with those issues differently for wherever they're located.
Liz lives in Hull, Massachusetts, a town surrounded by water, and sometimes under it. The town of Hull is this unique, quirky, tiny spit of land about an hour-long drive south from Boston, a 7-mile peninsula in the shape of an upside-down L. It juts into the capricious waters of the Boston Harbor. Roughly 11,000 people live in Hull, and the sandy Nantasket Beach along Hull's eastern ocean-facing edge draws visitors from all over New England. And Hull residents are lucky to pass by this beach on their way home. But this magical town has a downside.
When the water's holding with the tide, I'm gonna let it flood.
A literal downside, where parts of the town are lower in elevation than others. And during the storms and high tides, those areas flood.
Check out these waves in Hull, Massachusetts.
This was from the latest high tide and also causing some damage.
That storm had the pressure and wind speed of like a hurricane.
Sometimes during high tide, there isn't much beach left. And right now, we're at low tide, and there's not a whole lot of beach left.
Roughly 2/3 of Hull is in a coastal floodplain, so flooding is pretty much a fact of life in this community, and it has been for some time. But with climate change comes bigger and more intense storms. That, combined with rising sea levels and high tides, is forcing residents to confront it.
I would say sea level rise is certainly a concern, and it's showing up as nuisance flooding elsewhere.
Climate's always changed, it always will. If you live in a coastal community that's in a flood zone, you're vulnerable to coastal flooding.
Hull is a long, narrow peninsula. So you actually find neighborhoods with very different types of lived experiences environmentally.
The only 2 options you have if you don't elevate is you try to get a buyout from FEMA. But I just don't know where I would go.
Today, we have a story of a town in a continuous battle against flooding. One where residents and City Hall employees all must reckon with the force beyond their control as they try to figure out how they will adapt to it. I'm Jasmine Aguilera, and this is The Globe. To live in Hull, Massachusetts is to live through floods.
So far this winter, we've had one time where it's egressed over the street. Before that, I believe I had a total of 9 times in 24.
Brian lives in Hampton Circle, a small neighborhood on Hull's western side, the Bay Side.
Brian lives up here, and I live down here.
This will probably help it a little bit more, because that would be...
Around the corner and a few streets over is Liz Kay, who lives right on that shoreline. Liz and Brian keep an eye on the tides and weather for possible flooding events.
Brian, there was an 11/8 tide last 2 nights.
Yeah, I know. It peaked at 12.2 because there was a tidal surge.
In tidal terms, 12.2 means 12.2 inches.
I get affected when it reaches 13.2.
Okay.
When the tide is high, the backyards along Bay Street can start to take on water.
This beach here had a 12.4 foot high tide. The water will be up to the start of the asphalt, and 12.5 to 12.6, it just starts to come over. Okay.
And if there's a storm surge or rain or heavy winds, any additional force that would push high tide waters or add to them, it floods. Major floods in Hull are caused by a combination of high water levels and storm surges or torrential downpours. The high tide saturates the ground, and the rain drops excess water onto an already full drain system. This recipe, storms and high tides, is one of the conditions to pay attention to.
What will happen is that people that know that if it starts at a certain time, that this general area here where they are will move their vehicles. They have to move them up to higher ground. And then wait for the water to come in, and when the water goes out, they move their cars back. You have to walk around and say, hey, listen, by the way, you should invest in either a tide chart or download an app, because you have to watch out for these things.
Because you can get lulled into believing that things are just really nice out here, but there's a lot more going on. And then
year-round residents like Brian and Liz have invested heavily in being prepared for the flooding.
Regular portable generators, like construction generators, that's what I have.
Wait, do you have like little 1400s, like little Hondas?
No,
big ones.
I got 2 8500s.
Yeah.
It's all the thing is that you have to keep ahead of the water if you got a basement and stuff like that.
Liz has a basement made of concrete block, and her house has also been raised 4 feet.
So I'll take you into the basement. All of my appliances, everything is off the ground by 4 feet. I also have a sump, and I can also put on a dry vac, and I also have a dehumidifier. But I have very little water that comes in, and so I deal with a very different experience than what Brian's dealing with.
So then naturally I've been here for 62 years. I've known over the years of what to do. When it's predicting a 12-foot tide, what I do, I go to National Weather Service site for coastal projections to see what, like if we have a storm, what the rise will be. And if it's telling me we're going to get a possibility of 1.5 to 2 foot surge, I better start doing something, because that means my cellar, my backyard, up to my front of my house is going to be underwater. And people sometimes say I'm crazy because I'll have sandbags piled up my driveway and the pump's running. When I'm all set with my pumps in my cellar, pumping away, I'll walk around the neighborhood, make sure the drains are open.
I lived in the area, Gunrock area, my entire life, on Atlantic Ave for 60 years.
Bart Kelly is the town's building commissioner. He's dealt with the floods his entire life, too.
And I had my house for 9 years, and I lost 3 cars in 9 years, 3 different storms. Like I said, I lived down in Gunrock. I bought my house in 1992 after the 91 storm.
The Gunrock neighborhood is one of Hull's most southern neighborhoods. It's surrounded by water, the Atlantic Ocean in front, and Straits Pond behind. And it floods a lot. But that didn't deter Bart.
And you still kept living there for 9 years?
Yeah, you get out when the storm's coming.
Yeah.
And I had to go get a bobcat and clean my driveway.
Oh my God.
But it wasn't a big deal.
I mean, it's a bobcat. I mean, I guess it's not a big deal for you as a building person, but...
No, but I mean, me and my neighbors, we'd split the cost.
On the phone with me, Bart seemed kind of unfazed by the flooding issue. Not like he didn't care about it, he did, but more that he'd been dealing with it for so long that he just thought, well, it is what it is.
Like the blizzard of 78, the houses that got demolished in Gunrock, they were 100 years old. They were in an area that always flooded. So the best thing you can do is to build to the resiliency standards in the building code and the flood maps, and make sure that you're building to the proper code and the proper construction. Just like if you're in an earthquake zone or you're in a fire zone or a heavy snow load zone, you got to build to that code.
And Hull has codes specific to flood compliance for most of the peninsula. Since 62% of Hull is in a 100-year floodplain, according to globe analysis of FEMA data, that means most of Hull is in the flood zone.
That's why the town elevated the seawall down there, because the town was constantly having to go down and clean the road after storms, because of gravel and stuff washed across the road. Got to send front-end loaders down there, clean it all up, push it back up against the seawall, and all that stuff. So they got federal and state money to elevate the seawall by 3 feet, and that 3-foot seawall elevation made all the difference in the world.
Seawalls are an important part of Hull's infrastructure. They're coastal defense structures, literally cement and stone walls, made to deflect and disperse waves from eroding and flooding the land behind them. A few have existed here for generations already, and one is currently being rebuilt along Nantasket Avenue, along Hull's northern end. You can still see the remnants of the old seawall there.
The low wall, as we call it, that little wall that I said was in worse condition, it collapsed. Oh. And the wall needed to be moved.
Kevin Mooney is a civil engineer overseeing the project. It's been in the works since 2014, and in fact, it was prioritized because of how crucial it was.
1/3 of the town is past this point. If this wall went, 1/3 of the town is cut off. There's so much that goes on past this point. All the schools, Coast Guard station, ferry terminal.
The $15 million project was funded by a combination of federal and state grants, and also by the taxpayers of Hull, to the tune of $6 million. And it's the first major seawall in the state that has moved inward towards land, among other necessary fortifications.
We are raising the road 3 feet. We're building up a vegetated barrier on the lagoon side, and we're putting in a walkway. We had a lot of pushback from the townspeople because this road was a two-way road and it's now becoming one way. It's a touchy issue for the people that use it. We've done the best we can to satisfy as many as we can, but overall, we're looking for the protection of everybody. But we can't do hard structures alone. We need to be able to integrate soft structures with it. If we still had beaches in front of our walls, we wouldn't have all the issues we have with the hard structures. Bring back our beaches.
Beaches are a crucial part of Hull's flood defense because they act as airbags that blunt the impact of storms and waves. So while seawalls deflect forces, beaches absorb them. And over on the eastern shore of Hull, along the stretch of Beach Avenue with no seawall protection, Chris Krahforst, the town's director of climate adaptation and conservation, was trying to protect the only natural defense that part of Hull has.
I'm here to make sure that they're not injuring the dunes and taking away or affecting the public's interest in having those be protected.
We met up with Chris on the sandy dunes off of W Street, where he was watching a crew that was cleaning up seaweed. As the crews on the beach scooped up the seaweed, Chris paid careful attention to the sand dunes underneath.
This is the high area on the peninsula, at least in the floodplain. It's the highest area. So if water gets through this area, it doesn't just affect these homes. Water migrates to the low areas. So all the homes behind have the potential to be flooded. So we use the dunes as a very natural and inexpensive way to provide storm damage protection and flood control. Instead of building these big seawalls, why not let nature help us? If they hit the dunes, they're not hitting your house. So,
in fact, most of the peninsula of Hull was once a giant barrier beach. Barrier because it provided a barrier to the mainland, protecting it from storms coming off of the Atlantic Ocean. And beach, because that's exactly what Hull was. A big, sandy, marshy beach with dunes all the way across. But now that Hull has developed land with homes and buildings on it, the push and pull of the tides, the threat of storm surges and floods, means Hull residents, like Brian, have few options in the face of the flooding.
First off, elevation, okay? This seems to be the new big thing. Let's elevate the house. Okay, awesome. So if you raise your house, put it up on stilts. Now, the real estate's selling you the water view. Say, I have a water view, right? This house just went up. I don't have my view anymore. Okay, so what's going to stop? Everybody starts raising the things. Now we have all these houses on stilts in the neighborhood. I mean, it really doesn't look that great, you know? So am I happy? Not really.
What's the other option if not elevation?
Well, I guess the only two options you have if you don't elevate is you try to get a buyout from FEMA and just leave.
This option, in climate adaptation terms, is called planned retreat, and it's a sticky topic for residents. No one I talk to wants to just up and leave. Back in the Office for Climate Adaptation and Conservation, Chris told me about the buyout program funded by FEMA that the town coordinates on behalf of inquiring residents.
FEMA offered a grant program that paid up to X amount of fair market value, something like that. So there was that option too, and I've never actually engaged anyone on it.
So no one's taken the buyout yet?
Well, not on their own, but they've expressed, I've had a couple of residents said, hey, let's look at that a little bit more.
For most people, retreat means leaving Hull entirely. Although, not for Chris.
Aren't you personally, as a resident, worried about flooding for your home? Or are you in the Highland?
I'm up on the Highlands,
Yeah.
out of the flood.
Turns out he's done something of a retreat himself.
I was in probably one of the worst spots, but I no longer am there. I used to be right on the beach.
But making the decision to walk away from a big emotional and financial investment, as buying a home almost always is not an easy thing to do. And that's if you can find another home nearby.
In our community, folks will say, well, where am I retreating to? Because we are postage stamped, fully developed community. So for us to retreat means, see you later, I'm leaving the community.
Making the decision to move out of your home and hometown, that's even harder. For Brian, who has spent all 62 years of his life here, it's almost impossible to imagine.
You'd probably have to move to another town which doesn't give you what you've strived for all your years, what you've worked for. When you reach a certain age in your life and you try to reestablish yourself, I mean, I just don't know where I would go.
All of these residents and local government employees agree that the town of Hull needs to respond to the flooding. But exactly how to respond and why dealing with the flooding is more urgent now than ever, well, that's a source of some contention.
Unfortunately, there's too many committees.
I am pretty convinced that that's climate-induced groundwater change.
The town misses opportunities because NIMBY group says, oh, we don't want that built there.
Who am I answering to? And that's the public. We're actually managing climate change right now.
That's after the break.
This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Healthcare professionals can lead their careers with LinkedIn. Discover jobs by specialty, preferred shifts, and even desired salary. From mental health therapists to radiology technicians, it's now faster and easier for healthcare professionals to find the right fit. Learn more at linkedin.com/healthcare. Side effects may include faster job placement, improved work-life balance, and increased career satisfaction.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
In Hull Town Hall, reminders of the ocean were all around us. In Chris's office, the piles of Xerox paper smelled faintly of beachy mildew, and the file cabinets had a saltwater patina on them. On his computer, Chris pulled up some graphs of sea level rise models.
Let me see if I can show this to you quickly. And I did a little math exercise because that's what I do sometimes on conservation.
The graph shows that flooding due only to sea level rise, as in the sea level rises so much that parts of Hull are permanently flooded by seawater, turning them into an island, is a danger that could take decades to hit the community, maybe even less. It's hard to say for sure.
When would this curve hit 10?
Oh.
Year 2150. But it could be instantaneous too. We could have, glaciers severing off and falling into the ocean and getting a catastrophic foot rise too. So I don't know.
Right now, Hull is like a pool deck, a bit of land that is meant to take on water. Hull has always been a flood-prone area. That hasn't changed. Hull has also had lots of big storms pass over the years. That hasn't changed. So the idea that climate change makes flood planning even more urgent now than ever, for some, that's harder to accept.
I've lived here my whole life. I don't see that storms are more frequent. I see that it's cyclical. It's cyclical with the moon.
Bart Kelly doesn't think climate change is responsible for flooding problems. He may not even fully buy into climate change at all.
I don't think sea level rise is the cause, and it may or may not be happening. I don't think that the data set that they used that the UN climate study put out 20 years ago, and, Al Gore's movie, An Inconvenient Truth, right? That movie, none of them came true.
Gore's movie, released in 2006, simply outlines the basics of what's driving climate change, as well as the impacts of sea level rise. Gore wanted to alert people to the long-term predictions of what could happen to coastal communities if the world didn't stop adding more greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. Not guarantees, predictions. But predicting coastal flooding may not feel as scary in Hull, because Hull has always flooded.
And I can show historical photos of Hull, of Pemberton Pier 100 years ago and Pemberton Pier today. And you look at the rack line for the tide, and it's basically in the same spot. But I don't know what day that picture was taken 100 years ago, and I don't know if it was a full moon tide, right? So, and then the dynamics of the beaches change all the time with storms and currents.
But the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the NOAA, which is the federal department in charge of all things oceanic affecting the country, like tides and sea levels and oceanic maps and so on, they do confirm that sea levels have risen. The Boston Harbor waters that Hull sits in has experienced at least a foot of it, actually, from 1921 to 2023. That's already happened. More than a foot of sea level rise in 100 years in the area. Even the U.S. Coast Guard now takes sea level rise into account in their wargame training. But despite the data of rising sea levels in charts and oceanic maps, Bart's perception of flooding and tides in Hull don't match up with these warning signs. It just doesn't look or feel right to him. And what Bart thinks matters. He's the building commissioner, and he clearly cares a lot about keeping his hometown vibrant and economically viable. But as someone who is skeptical about the effects of climate change on flooding, his approach to the flooding problem will have real influence on how Hull responds. Across town and inside Liz's home, in front of the breathtaking views of the water from her picture window, we all crowded into her living room. Liz, Brian, me, producer Ann Lee, climate reporter Aaron Douglas, and the elephant in the room. Climate change.
Do you think it's gotten worse since you were a kid and growing up here?
As familiar as Brian is with the flooding, he stops short of blaming the worsening floods on climate change. He never actually said the words climate change, though he does think flooding is getting worse.
It goes in spans. Usually every 5 to 10 years, we'll get the worst of it, like 2018, we get hit bad. But we only had a couple of floods that year, but we had the floods all together. 23, 24, It was like 9 floods, but they were spread out over a couple of months. It goes by what the tides are anyway, because we have 2 actual high tides a month. Usually the second of the 2 tides is the higher of the 2. But yeah, of course it's going to get worse.
Do you come together at the town hall and talk about it? Or is this just you guys being really ahead of the game here?
The one thing is that, I don't know, if people want to know, and if they want to listen. Around here, a lot of times it's when something does happen, then people are like, okay, I need to know something. We do have workshops sometimes.
Is there disagreement?
On what to do?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Depending on where your property is located and how you want to experience it, of course there's a disagreement.
And she would know. Liz is an active member on several committees and organizations, like Hull's chapter of the Metropolitan Area Planning Council and a citizen action group called Save Our Space Hull. These groups and committees often weigh in on community action or local government projects, and Liz emphasized to me many times how difficult it can be to square all the different interests involved with any kind of community or local government project. And that kind of disagreement, even if it's a necessary part of the process, takes quite some time.
I'm going to say this, and it's, I don't know, people can take it the way they want. Unfortunately, there's too many committees, there's too many commissions, there's too many things that stuff have to go through. Too much red tape, that everybody has to make sure that everything isn't going to hurt this, isn't going to do this, isn't going to, okay. Instead of just doing something, we have to wait for this group, this group, this group, this part of the state, this part of the government for something to transpire. That's all well and good, but the way these things happen, it takes at least 10 to 20 years. And who knows if they've designed something that was actually going to work.
If to live in Hull is to live through floods, then what does it mean to prepare for the future in a place like Hull? Beyond looking to the past, as Bart Kelly does with his 100-year-old photos. Beyond looking to the present, as Brian does with his generators and sandbags. Beyond looking to the future, as Liz has done with her committees and outreach. Beyond looking to a possible future, as Chris Krahforst does with his models and predictors. Everyone has to figure out this problem for themselves. And together. What does that look like when no one can start on the same page? And yet, these neighbors with vastly different perspectives still try to work together. This episode was reported by me, Aaron Douglas, and Ann Lee. Produced by me and Ann Lee. Sound designed and engineered by me. Edited by Kristen Nelson and Jason Margolis. Special thanks to Ken Mahan, Yuhyun Jung, John Hancock, Christina Prignano, Tim Logan, Sabrina Shankman, Anika Butler, Christy Silva, and Catherine Carlock. I'm Jasmine Aguilera. Thanks for listening.